The Apache bride never came, so the mountain man tracked the wreck and found her dying. The mountain man was used to living alone in the wilderness. Years of traveling through forests, mountains, and rivers had taught him to survive in places most people would never dare to go. He knew how to track animals, build shelter, and find food where nothing seemed to grow. His life was simple, yet hard. Still, there was one thing he had never experienced before: the hope of someone waiting for him, someone he cared about deeply. The woman he was expecting was not just any traveler. She was an Apache woman he had met months earlier during a trading journey. She had a calm courage about her, a quiet strength that matched the wildness of the land. They had spoken often by letters, and each word carried more meaning than the last. The mountain man remembered her laugh, light and soft, echoing in the tent where they had first shared a meal together. He remembered the way she had looked at the mountains, as if she understood their secrets. He had never met anyone like her. She had promised to join him, to become his bride, and he had waited with patience and hope, counting the days until he would see her again. At first, waiting had seemed easy. He kept busy with the chores of his remote cabin. He chopped wood, hunted deer, and repaired tools. He also spent time preparing for her arrival. He wanted the cabin to be clean and comfortable, with warm blankets and fresh food ready for her. He even gathered wildflowers from nearby meadows, thinking that a small gesture of beauty might make her journey brighter. But as the days passed, the mountain man began to feel a tension he had never known. Letters and messengers that were supposed to bring news of her arrival were delayed, or did not arrive at all. His hope started to mingle with worry. Something did not feel right. He began to speak to travelers passing through the area, asking carefully if anyone had seen a woman traveling alone or with a small group heading toward his cabin. Most people shrugged and shook their heads, but a few mentioned vague stories of a wagon struggling through muddy paths or a traveler seen resting by a river. Each fragment of information was a thread he tried to follow, connecting it in his mind like a puzzle. He remembered the kindness in her eyes and could not imagine why she would fail to reach him. Perhaps the path had been too difficult, he thought. Perhaps the weather had been cruel. Perhaps she had simply been delayed, but a deeper part of him feared the worst. Every evening, he would sit by the fire and stare into the flames, listening to the distant sounds of the wilderness, the call of owls, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the faint crack of branches under the weight of some unseen animal. These sounds reminded him of the dangers that traveled with anyone moving through the wild. He could not help imagining her struggling alone through unfamiliar terrain, her hands raw from climbing rocks or guiding a stubborn horse through rough paths. He could picture the rain soaking her clothes, cold seeping into her bones, the worry growing heavier with each mile she traveled. His heart ached for her safety. Every moment of silence was filled with questions. Where is she now? Is she safe? Has she been hurt? The uncertainty weighed on him, and he realized that hope was no longer enough. He had to find answers. The next morning, he decided to follow the trail that he believed she might have taken. He packed his horse with essential supplies, dried meat, fresh water, a blanket, and a small first aid kit he had prepared carefully. He knew the journey would be difficult, and he had to be ready for anything. The forest was dense, the rivers deep and fast, and the paths could disappear without warning. Yet he set out with determination, trusting in his skills and his knowledge of the land. Every footprint, every broken branch, every mark on a tree became a clue. He followed them with patience, careful not to disturb the tracks, reading the land like a book. Along the way, he met people who had noticed travelers or wagons passing through. Though none could provide clear answers, one old trapper mentioned seeing a wagon stuck near a creek a week ago. A young settler spoke of hearing a woman's voice calling for help near a hill. Each piece of information, though uncertain, strengthened his resolve. He knew the land was vast and unforgiving, but he had to keep going. He could not ignore the possibility that she might be in trouble. As he traveled, memories of her kept him moving forward. He remembered the stories she had shared about her family, her childhood in the Apache lands, and the wisdom she carried about living in harmony with nature. He remembered the way she had spoken of the mountains, not as obstacles, but as guardians, holding secrets and lessons for those who were willing to listen. He thought about her strength and bravery, and he knew that whatever had happened, she had faced it with courage. But still the uncertainty gnawed at him. He imagined the challenges she might have faced: rough terrain, harsh weather, wild animals, and the loneliness of traveling without guidance. Even as he worried, he also prepared for success. He thought about how he would greet her if he found her safe. He pictured the moment she arrived at his cabin, tired but smiling, and he would offer her warm food, a clean bed, and comfort. He would listen to her stories of the journey and help her heal from the hardships she had endured. He imagined a quiet evening by the fire, talking and laughing, the wilderness around them peaceful and calm. That vision gave him strength, and he pressed on, moving steadily through the forest and over the hills. Nightfall brought its own challenges. The shadows of trees stretched long and dark, and the sounds of the wild were sharper in the silence of the evening. Yet the mountain man remained alert. He knew the land could be both beautiful and dangerous, and he respected it fully. He set up a small camp near a stream, building a fire and securing his horse. He ate a simple meal, but most of his mind was with her. Sleep came only in short bursts, filled with dreams of her journey, and he woke early, eager to continue. Each day the trail offered new signs: a trampled patch of grass, a piece of cloth caught on a branch, or a wheel mark partially covered in mud. These small details kept his hope alive, even as his concern grew. By the end of the first week of his search, he realized that the journey ahead would not be easy. The land became rougher, with steep cliffs and wide rivers that required careful crossing. Yet the mountain man's skill and experience guided him. He read the land carefully, finding safe paths, avoiding dangerous areas, and following signs that others might overlook. He carried memories of her laughter and courage with him, imagining her moving bravely through the same landscape, and that gave him courage in return. Every day he reminded himself that the journey was not just about finding her, but about ensuring her safety. He would not give up, no matter how difficult the path. He moved steadily, carefully marking areas he had checked, keeping notes in his mind, and always watching for signs that she might have passed through. The wilderness could be cruel, but he knew he had the skills, determination, and love to overcome it. The mountain man's journey in this first part of the search was as much about endurance as it was about hope. It was about preparing himself mentally and physically for the unknown, keeping faith alive while acknowledging danger, and remaining vigilant in a world that could be both breathtaking and harsh. The wilderness tested him, the waiting challenged him, and the unknown haunted him, but the thought of finding her, of bringing her safely to him, carried him forward. By the time he stopped for his second night in the wild, he realized one thing clearly: this journey was only beginning. Every step mattered, every clue could be the key, and every day he moved closer to discovering whether the woman he waited for had reached him or whether the wilderness had claimed her first. And so, with a fire crackling under the stars, he looked at the dark silhouette of the mountains in the distance and whispered to himself, "I will find you. I will not stop." The mountain man continued his journey, moving deeper into the wilderness. The forest seemed endless, with tall trees that blocked the sun and thick undergrowth that made each step slow and careful. Every sound of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the distant call of a bird, made him alert. He knew the wilderness could be beautiful, but also dangerous. One wrong step could lead to injury, and one missed clue could mean losing the trail forever. He kept reminding himself that every detail mattered. Every mark on the land could tell a story. As he rode his horse along narrow paths, he looked carefully for signs of the woman's passage. Sometimes he saw footprints in soft earth, partially washed away by rain but still visible to a trained eye. He noticed broken branches in unusual places, as if someone had struggled through the brush. Small pieces of cloth or thread clinging to bushes gave him hope. Each sign was a whisper from the past, telling him she had passed this way. His heart beat faster whenever he saw a clue, but he also reminded himself to stay calm. The trail could be misleading, and the forest could easily hide dangers. Along the way, he met travelers and trappers who had noticed unusual things. An old hunter mentioned seeing a lone wagon struggling across a muddy clearing, and a group of farmers recalled hearing a woman's voice calling near a stream. Each story was uncertain, but the mountain man listened carefully, noting every detail. He understood that the smallest clue could be crucial. Even a footprint or a piece of food left behind could tell him something about her condition, the direction she had taken, and how recently she had passed through. The wilderness was vast, and he knew he had to pay attention to everything to find her. The mountain man's mind often wandered back to memories of her. He remembered the way she had spoken about the land, about rivers, mountains, and forests, as if she were part of it herself. She had a quiet wisdom, a knowledge of the natural world that impressed him deeply. He thought about her courage, imagining her moving through difficult terrain, crossing streams, climbing hills, and enduring the heat of the sun and the cold of the night. He pictured her determination, and it made him more determined. He could not stop. He had to follow the trail, no matter how long or difficult the journey became. The land grew rougher as he moved on. The gentle slopes turned into steep hills, and the rivers grew wider and faster. Some paths were blocked by fallen trees, forcing him to find another way. He guided his horse carefully, using all his skills to avoid dangerous drops and hidden routes. Each obstacle reminded him how challenging this search truly was. Yet, he felt a strange connection to the wilderness. He knew it could be unforgiving, but it also had its own rules and patterns. If he understood them, he could survive. And he was confident he could survive long enough to find her. One evening, he came across a small clearing where he noticed something unusual. There were signs of a struggle, trampled grass, a broken branch, and footprints that suggested someone had tried to move through quickly. His heart raced. Could this be her? He dismounted and walked carefully, examining every mark. He realized that the trail might be very recent, maybe only a day or two old. He followed it cautiously, knowing that moving too fast could mean losing the trail, and moving too slow could waste precious time. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, knowing that someone's life could depend on his ability to read these signs correctly. The mountain man also faced the challenge of finding food and water for himself and his horse. He hunted small game, fished in streams, and gathered edible plants when he could. He always made sure to leave no trace behind, respecting the land that was both his friend and his teacher. Nights were the hardest. The forest became alive with sounds, the howling of wolves in the distance, the rustle of animals moving nearby, and the wind shaking the trees. He often stayed awake for hours, listening, thinking, and planning his next moves. The cold at night was sharp, but he wrapped himself in blankets and kept the fire small and hidden, careful not to attract unwanted attention. As he traveled further, he found signs that others had been nearby recently. A campfire still had warm ashes, and footprints suggested that someone had rested there not long ago. He paused, studying them carefully. Could this have been her, or someone helping her? He realized that every day that passed without finding her made the journey more urgent. Time was precious. If she was injured or lost, she could not survive alone for long. The mountain man's mind was focused, his body alert, and his heart determined. He had to find her, and he had to do it soon. The mountain man also thought about the weather. Storms could arrive suddenly in the wilderness, and rivers could rise quickly, making paths dangerous or impossible to cross. He watched the clouds carefully, learning to read the sky like a map. When a storm approached, he found safe spots to wait it out. He knew the land could be unpredictable, and he respected it fully. Every challenge, every obstacle, made him more aware of the importance of staying alert, following every clue, and never underestimating the dangers of the wilderness. Days turned into nights, and the mountain man continued steadily. His determination never faltered, even when the trail became faint or confusing. He remembered the woman's words, her laughter, and the courage she had shown when they first met. That memory gave him strength. He knew that she was brave, but she had to be found before the wilderness could harm her. Every creek, every hill, every path could hold clues. He observed the land with care, noticing small details like the direction of broken branches, the depth of footprints, and the marks left on rocks by dragging something heavy. These signs gave him hope that he was on the right path. At one point he crossed a river that was wider and faster than any he had seen before. The current was strong and the rocks were slippery. He dismounted and led his horse carefully across, making sure not to lose balance. On the other side he found more signs, a torn piece of cloth caught on a bush, and footprints that led deeper into the forest. The mountain man felt a surge of hope. He was close. He could feel it in the air, in the silence of the forest, in the subtle signs that the woman had passed this way. He followed the trail with renewed energy, careful but quick, knowing that every moment counted. The mountain man also faced moments of doubt. Sometimes the trail seemed to vanish, and he wondered if he was on the wrong path. Sometimes he worried that the signs he saw were misleading, created by animals or other travelers. But he never let fear stop him. He trusted his instincts, his knowledge of the land, and the memory of the woman he was searching for. He knew she would not give up easily, and he believed she had done her best to survive. That belief kept him moving forward, step by step, hour by hour, mile by mile. As night fell, he made a small camp near a hill, setting up a fire and securing his horse. He thought about the day's journey and the trail he had followed. Every sign, every clue brought him closer to finding her. Even though he was tired and his body ached, he felt a deep sense of purpose. The wilderness was vast, and the dangers were real, but he knew he had to keep going. He could not stop until he had found her. The thought of finally seeing her safe and alive was the only reward he needed, and it carried him through the long, quiet night. The mountain man's journey through the forest in these days was as much about endurance as it was about hope. Every step was careful, every observation deliberate, and every night spent in vigilance. The forest tested him, the trail challenged him, and the unknown pushed him to his limits. But he moved forward with courage and determination, driven by the memory of the woman he was searching for and the promise he had made to find her. He was not just following a trail, he was following a hope, a belief in survival, and the unwavering determination to save someone he cared about deeply. After days of following the faint trail through the dense forest and rugged hills, The mountain man began to sense that he was drawing closer to something important. The signs of her passage were becoming clearer. Broken branches, footprints in soft soil, and remnants of items left behind hinted at a struggle. His heart beat faster with every discovery. He knew he was close, and yet the sense of danger grew stronger. The wilderness was beautiful, but it had a way of hiding peril in plain sight. The mountain man had learned to respect the land, and he moved carefully, alert to every sound, smell, and movement. One morning, as the sun rose over the misty hills, he noticed a small clearing ahead. The air felt different there, still, heavy, as if holding its breath. On the ground, he saw fresh tracks of a wagon that had been overturned. The wheel marks were jagged, indicating a sudden stop or accident. Pieces of wood and cloth were scattered around, and the soil was churned up as if a struggle had taken place. The mountain man dismounted slowly, studying the scene. His trained eyes took in every detail. He could tell that someone had tried to survive here, but the effort had been desperate and difficult. He knelt and examined a fragment of a broken wagon wheel. The wood was splintered, and the nail holes showed that the wagon had been in motion when it struck some obstacle. A faint scent of smoke lingered in the air, probably from a small fire built to keep warm or cook food. Nearby, he noticed the imprints of shoes and boots, some belonging to a woman, some to others who may have been traveling with her. He realized that this was the site of the accident, and the thought that she might have been hurt filled him with urgency. He mounted his horse and moved slowly around the wreck, calling her name softly, listening for any response. The forest seemed to swallow his words, returning only silence. The mountain man's mind raced as he pieced together what might have happened. The wagon had likely slipped or hit a rock, causing it to overturn. The passengers had tried to save what they could, but the terrain was rough, and they were alone in the wilderness. He imagined her trying to push the wagon upright, helping those around her, and struggling to keep calm in the face of fear. The thought made him both anxious and determined. He knew she could be injured or exhausted, and time was critical. He had to find her before the forest or cold could make her situation worse. He searched the area carefully, moving along the path the wagon must have taken. He spotted a torn piece of cloth, caught on a thorny bush. It was familiar to him, the color she often wore. His heart leapt. This was a sign that he was on the right trail, that she had indeed passed through this place. He followed the footprints that led away from the wreck, moving slowly and deliberately. Each step was measured, each movement cautious, because he had learned that rushing could cause him to miss important clues. The forest was alive around him. Birds called from the trees, and small animals scurried through the underbrush, yet he could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. As he moved further, he noticed more signs of a struggle. The ground was disturbed, and a few personal items, a small pouch, a hat, a scarf, were left behind. He realized that she had been trying to continue the journey despite the accident. The mountain man felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief that she was moving and showing strength, and worry because the path ahead was still long and dangerous. He adjusted his supplies, making sure he had enough food, water, and medicine in case he found her in need. He reminded himself to stay calm, to keep observing, and to follow every trace that could lead him to her. Trees grew closer together, and thick undergrowth made movement difficult. He had to navigate carefully, sometimes dismounting and leading his horse, checking every step before moving forward. He noticed that the footprints seemed to weaken at points, almost as if she had struggled to continue. He paused, studying the soil and marks left behind. His experience told him that she had been tired, possibly injured, and had had to rest frequently. He made mental notes of the spots that might provide shelter and safe places to rest, in case she had stopped there or needed help. The mountain man also thought about the animals of the forest. Predators could be nearby, drawn by the smell of humans. He kept his senses sharp, listening for unusual sounds and scanning for movement. He remembered the story she had told him about surviving in the wild, and he thought about her courage. Yet he also knew that she could not handle the dangers alone for much longer. His determination grew with every step. He knew that if he could reach her, he could provide the help she needed to survive. By midday, he reached a small river that had likely slowed her journey. The current was strong, and the banks were steep, but he noticed tracks leading from the riverbank into the woods on the other side. The mountain man carefully crossed, making sure not to disturb any clues. On the other side, he found more signs, footprints, a partially collapsed branch, and a small bundle that had been left behind. Each sign told him that she was nearby, and he felt a surge of hope. He called out softly, listening for a response, but only the wind and birds answered. Still, he continued, moving with careful urgency. As he moved deeper into the forest, he noticed signs that indicated someone had tried to make a temporary shelter. Broken branches were arranged as if to form a small barrier, and leaves were flattened on the ground as if to provide a place to rest. He knelt, examining the area, and realized that she had likely spent the night here. The mountain man's mind filled with thoughts of her alone, enduring the cold and dark, doing everything she could to survive. He felt a mix of admiration for her strength and urgency to find her before she became too weak. He pressed on, following the trail through the hills and valleys. The forest was quieter now, as if holding its breath, and the air felt heavier. He noticed more personal items scattered along the way, a small piece of jewelry, a leather strap, and torn pieces of cloth. These small clues confirmed that he was on the right track. His heart raced, knowing he was getting closer. He called out her name again, softer this time, almost whispering, as if speaking gently would guide her to him. The forest gave no reply, but the mountain man felt a quiet confidence. He was near. He could feel it in the signs, in the air, and in his own instincts. By late afternoon, he reached a secluded area where the trail ended abruptly. The forest opened slightly into a small clearing, and he saw signs of a serious accident. The wagon had clearly overturned here, leaving splintered wood and scattered belongings. The marks on the ground indicated that someone had struggled to move, possibly carrying or dragging items. The mountain man dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the area. The sense of danger was stronger here, but so was hope. He knew that she could be nearby, perhaps injured and in need of immediate help. He moved cautiously through the clearing, searching behind bushes, near rocks, and along the edges of the trees. Every detail mattered. He could feel his pulse quicken as he imagined finding her, injured but alive. He reminded himself to stay calm, to observe carefully, and to be ready to act quickly. The forest seemed to grow quieter, as if waiting with him. And then, in the distance, he heard a faint sound, a groan, soft and weak, almost lost in the wind. His heart leapt. He moved faster but carefully, following the sound through the underbrush, knowing that every step could bring him closer to saving her life. The faint groan had reached him, and the mountain man's heart pounded as he pushed through the thick underbrush. Every branch and thorn scratched his arms and face, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was finding her, helping her, and making sure she survived. His eyes scanned the ground carefully, and his ears listened for even the smallest sound. He could feel that he was close. The signs of struggle were everywhere: broken branches, disturbed leaves, and footprints that had become increasingly faint, as if she had been too weak to move quickly. Finally, in a small grove partially hidden by trees and bushes, he saw her. She was lying on the ground, pale and weak, her clothing torn and stained with dirt and some blood. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes fluttered as she tried to focus on him. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with fear. She was alive, but she was badly hurt. Without hesitation, he dismounted, leaving his horse tied to a nearby tree, and ran to her side. He knelt gently beside her, careful not to jostle her body, and called her name softly. Her eyes widened slightly, recognizing him immediately. A faint smile crossed her lips, but she could not speak. The mountain man checked her injuries quickly. She had scratches and bruises from the fall, and her ankles seemed twisted from trying to keep the wagon upright. He could see small cuts on her hands and arms, likely from branches and rocks. He also noticed that she was shivering, both from pain and from exposure to the cold forest air. The mountain man realized that he had to act quickly. Time was critical. He took off his coat and gently wrapped it around her, trying to warm her body. He spoke to her softly, reassuring her that she was not alone, that he had found her and would not leave her. His calm voice and steady hands helped her relax slightly, even though the pain was intense. He knew that panic could make her condition worse. He applied first aid as best he could with the supplies he had, cleaning her minor wounds and wrapping them with clean cloth. He was careful to keep her comfortable, moving slowly and deliberately, knowing that she was exhausted and in pain. Once her immediate injuries were tended, he began to think about the journey back. The terrain was rough, and she could not walk on her own. He looked around the grove and considered his options. There were fallen logs and rocks that could be used to help support her if he carried her, and he could make a makeshift stretcher from broken branches and the straps he had in his pack. He worked quickly but carefully, preparing for the long trek ahead. She watched him with weak eyes, and he smiled gently, telling her it would be all right. When the makeshift stretcher was ready, he helped her onto it, making sure she was secure and comfortable. He tied it carefully to a sturdy frame of branches, and he tested the balance to ensure she would not fall during the journey. The mountain man's heart ached as he looked at her fragile form, realizing how close she had come to being lost to the wilderness. He whispered words of encouragement, reminding her to hold on, to stay strong, and that they would reach safety together. His determination strengthened, and he knew he could not let anything happen to her. The journey through the forest was slow and challenging. He moved cautiously, stepping over rocks, through mud, and across shallow streams, making sure the stretcher remained stable. Every sound in the forest made him alert, but he kept his focus on moving forward. Birds flew overhead, small animals scurried away at his approach, and the wind rustled the leaves above, but he remained determined. He could feel her weight, her fragility, and the urgency of the situation pushed him to be both careful and swift. At one point, they came to a steep hill. The mountain man paused, studying the path carefully. He chose a route that was less steep but longer, knowing it was safer for her. He balanced the stretcher on his shoulders and adjusted the ropes to keep her stable. Each step was deliberate, each movement precise. Sweat ran down his face, and his arms ached, but he did not stop. He kept talking to her softly, telling her stories to keep her mind off the pain and to encourage her to stay conscious. Night began to fall, and the forest grew darker. He used his small lantern to light the way, but mostly relied on his memory of the terrain and his instincts. He found a small clearing to rest briefly, giving her water and a small piece of food. She was too weak to eat much, but the gesture helped her spirits. He wrapped her in additional blankets and stayed close, keeping watch through the night. He knew that any moment of inattention could be dangerous. The wilderness was unpredictable, and predators could be nearby, drawn by sound or scent. Yet, he remained calm, alert, and determined. As dawn approached, he resumed the journey. The forest was quieter, and the first light of morning filtered through the trees, giving him a clearer view of the path ahead. He spotted familiar landmarks he had passed on the trail earlier: a bend in the river, a fallen tree with a unique pattern, and a cluster of rocks that marked the path to the settlement. Each sight filled him with hope. They were making progress. He encouraged her gently, telling her that they were getting closer to safety, and she nodded weakly, squeezing his hand slightly to show she understood. Why? Why? The mountain man continued, pausing only when necessary to adjust the stretcher, offer water, or speak comforting words. He spoke of the warmth of a fire, of food, and of rest, trying to give her something to look forward to. The forest seemed less threatening in the morning light, but he remained cautious. He knew the danger could appear at any time: slippery ground, fallen branches, or sudden changes in the weather. He moved steadily, trusting his knowledge of the wilderness and his ability to protect her. Finally, after many hours of careful travel, he could see the first signs of the settlement in the distance. Small buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, and the sound of distant voices. Relief washed over him, but he kept his focus. He adjusted the stretcher one last time, making sure she was stable, and moved steadily toward help. Each step brought them closer to safety, and he spoke softly to her, telling her to hold on just a little longer. Her eyes met his, and she gave a small, grateful smile, finding comfort in his presence and strength. When they finally reached the edge of the settlement, people rushed to help. The mountain man gently handed her to those who could provide immediate care. He stayed close, speaking quietly to the healers about her injuries and the journey she had endured. The relief in her eyes was mirrored in his own, but he remained vigilant, making sure she was properly tended to. The experience had been exhausting, emotionally and physically, but he knew that the most important part, finding her and bringing her to safety, had been achieved. As she was carried inside for further care, the mountain man took a moment to rest. He looked back at the forest, the place that had tested their courage and resilience, and felt a deep respect for its power. He knew that without his skills and determination, she might not have survived. He also knew that the bond between them had grown stronger through this shared struggle. The wilderness had been merciless, but it had also proven their strength, courage, and hope. The mountain man stayed by her side as she slowly regained her strength over the following days. He brought food, water, and warmth, ensuring she was comfortable and safe. He listened as she recounted her journey, the obstacles she had faced, and how she had struggled to survive. Every word confirmed what he had suspected. She was brave, resourceful, and determined, but she had been fortunate that he had tracked her in time. Their connection grew deeper, rooted in the shared experience of survival, care, and unwavering determination to protect one another. Through the ordeal, the mountain man learned not only the value of his skills, but also the power of patience, observation, and empathy. He understood that love and care were as important as knowledge of the wilderness. The journey had tested them both physically and emotionally, but it had also revealed their resilience, courage, and the strength of the human spirit. They had faced the wild, the unknown, and danger together, and had emerged stronger. The experience forged a bond that would remain unbroken, built on trust, respect, and the determination to protect one another no matter the circumstances. After the mountain man had brought her safely to the settlement, the Apache woman was placed in a small, warm room where she could rest and recover. She was exhausted, her body battered and weak from the journey and the accident, but the relief in her eyes was clear. She was alive, and that was what mattered most. The mountain man stayed by her side, making sure she had everything she needed: blankets, water, and nourishing food. He spoke softly to her, offering comfort and encouragement, and she listened, grateful for his presence. Each day brought small improvements, and her strength slowly returned. The community around them was quiet but attentive. The healers provided what care they could, cleaning her wounds, setting her sprained ankle, and ensuring she rested properly. They were impressed by the mountain man's skill and careful attention to her needs. His knowledge of the wilderness and survival had been critical in keeping her alive until help arrived. Despite their admiration, he remained humble. He cared only for her well-being, determined that she would regain her strength fully. His patience and quiet determination were as vital to her recovery as the medical care she received. As the days passed, she began to sit up and eat more regularly. She talked in soft, shaky voices at first, sharing fragments of her journey, the accident, the difficult terrain, the nights alone in the forest, and the fear she had felt. The mountain man listened carefully, never interrupting, offering only encouragement and gentle questions. Each story she told confirmed the bravery and resilience she had shown. He realized that her survival was not only due to his tracking and care, but also to her own strength and determination. She had endured so much, and now she was slowly reclaiming her life. During this time, a bond grew between them that went beyond words. The shared struggle of the wilderness, the accident, and the rescue had created a connection built on trust, respect, and care. She looked at him with gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, something that could only develop when two people face extraordinary circumstances together. The mountain man, who had spent years in solitude, felt a warmth in his heart that he had never experienced before. He realized that their connection was not just about survival, but about shared courage, compassion, and hope. They began to plan for the future, cautiously at first. She needed time to fully heal, and he needed to ensure that the journey they were about to continue together would be safe. They discussed how they would travel back to his cabin once she was strong enough, and he promised her that he would carry supplies and prepare the path as best he could. Their conversations were calm, thoughtful, and full of care for one another. Even in the midst of recovery, they found joy in the idea of living together, sharing their lives in the wilderness, and facing whatever challenges the land might bring. The mountain man taught her small skills that could help her navigate the wilderness safely. He showed her how to identify edible plants, how to move quietly through the forest, and how to read subtle signs in the environment, broken branches, footprints, and patterns in the soil. She absorbed these lessons eagerly, grateful for the knowledge that could keep her safe. Each day of learning strengthened her confidence, and she felt more prepared for the life they would share. The mountain man was patient, guiding her with a calm hand and gentle words, understanding that her recovery was both physical and emotional. As the days turned into weeks, her strength returned steadily. She could walk without assistance, carry small items, and participate in preparing meals and tending to the cabin they had planned for together. The mountain man watched her with pride and relief. He knew that the journey had been perilous and that the forest could have taken her from him forever. But now, seeing her rise from weakness to vitality, he felt a deep sense of gratitude and fulfillment. Their connection had been tested in the wild, and it had emerged stronger than either of them could have imagined. The people in the settlement began to take notice of the bond between them. Neighbors and friends who had seen the mountain man's dedication and the woman's resilience began to share quiet words of admiration. Some remarked that it was rare to see such devotion, where one person had risked everything to find and care for another. Yet, the mountain man remained focused only on her well-being. He never sought recognition, praise, or reward. His purpose had always been clear: to ensure her safety, comfort, and happiness. When the day came for her to leave the settlement and return with him to his cabin, both felt a mixture of anticipation and careful excitement. The path back through the forest would still be long and challenging, but they were ready to face it together. He prepared carefully, bringing enough supplies, ensuring the horse was strong and healthy, and planning the safest route through the wilderness. She, now stronger and more confident, walked beside him willingly, ready to resume the journey as a partner, not just a survivor. Along the way they encountered familiar challenges, steep hills, muddy paths, and fast-flowing streams, but this time their progress was smoother. The mountain man moved with purpose, and she assisted where she could, carrying small items and helping to navigate the terrain. The journey, once fraught with danger and uncertainty, now became a shared adventure. They spoke and laughed, finding joy in simple moments, the sound of birds, the sight of wildflowers, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. Each moment strengthened their bond, turning the wilderness into a place of connection and life rather than fear. When they finally reached the cabin, it felt like home in a new, deeper way. The small dwelling that the mountain man had prepared now seemed complete, filled not only with warmth and comfort, but also with hope and love. They settled in, working together to build a life that honored both the wilderness around them and the connection they had forged. She tended to the cabin and garden, while he hunted, gathered, and maintained the land. Each day was a balance of work, care, and shared moments of quiet companionship. They had survived the wilderness, and now they were thriving in it together. The mountain man often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He thought about the wilderness, the accident, and the signs that had led him to her. He realized that the experience had taught him much about patience, perseverance, and the power of care. The bond they shared was stronger than he had ever imagined possible. They had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty together, and had emerged not only unbroken but closer than ever. The forest, once a place of danger and challenge, had become a backdrop for a story of courage, hope, and enduring partnership. Over time, the Apache woman regained full strength. She could walk freely, help with daily tasks, and explore the land around the cabin. She and the mountain man shared quiet evenings by the fire, talking about their past, their journey, and the life they hoped to build together. Their connection grew deeper each day, rooted in mutual respect, gratitude, and understanding. The mountain man admired her resilience and intelligence, while she appreciated his courage, care, and unwavering determination. Their shared experience of survival had created a trust that was unshakable. The story of their journey and reunion eventually spread quietly among nearby settlers. People spoke of the mountain man who had tracked a woman through the wilderness, of the courage of the Apache woman who had endured so much, and of the bond that had grown from adversity and care. Yet, for them, the story was less about admiration or attention, and more about the quiet, steady life they shared. They had discovered something far more valuable than recognition: the deep, enduring connection between two people who had faced the wild together and come through stronger. Life at the cabin settled into a rhythm. They hunted, gathered, and prepared food together. They cared for the land and for one another. The mountain man and the Apache woman had found not only survival but also a partnership built on trust, courage, and respect. Each day was a reminder of the journey they had endured, the obstacles they had overcome, and the power of hope and determination. Their story became one of quiet inspiration, a tale of resilience and the bond that emerges when two people face great challenges and never give up on each other. Through it all, they learned that love was not just about words, but about actions, showing care, protecting one another, and being present through hardship and recovery. The mountain man, who had once lived alone in the wilderness, now had a partner whose courage matched his own. The Apache woman, who had endured fear, injury, and uncertainty, now had someone she could trust completely. Together they had faced the wilderness, the accident, and the long journey to safety. Together they had found a life full of hope, resilience, and a deep, enduring bond that neither time nor hardship could break.